The origins of Proto-Afro-Asiatics. So we'll begin from Shem to Israel. This is part one of a video series. So in order to know who the ancient Hebrews of Israel are, we must understand who were their ancestors according to the scriptures. The Israelites were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But who were the ancestors of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? According to the Hebrew text, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, ancient ancestor was a man named Shem. If you read Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 through 26, it says, "This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters." So from 10 to 26 it reads, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serg, Nahor. Now Terah lived 70 years and begot Abraham. So from the lineage, starting with Jacob to Israel, from Jacob to Isaac to Abraham, going from Abraham back to Shem, we see that this lineage is very specific and male-oriented. The Israelites basically are a Semitic people because they descend from Shem. According to outside sources or according to the academic understanding of the Israelites, they are also Semitic. The Israelites were a confederation of Iron Age Semitic-speaking tribes of the ancient Near East. The Hebrew people are mostly taken as synonymous with Semitic-speaking Israelites. So historically, the Israelites also spoke a Semitic language called Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew script is the name used by modern scholars to describe the script found in Canaan, Canaanite inscriptions from the region of biblical Israel and Judea. Proto-Sinaitic, the North Semitic alphabet, is considered the earliest trace of alphabetic writing and the common ancestor of both the ancient South Arabian script and the Phoenician alphabet, which led to many modern alphabets, including the Greek alphabet. And so here is an example of the Proto-Sinaitic and Paleo-Hebrew. This is sort of like a timeline going backwards from where these scripts and languages come from. Paleo-Hebrew to Phoenician alphabet to Proto-Sinaitic script to even the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And here is a visual map showing from Paleo-Hebrew to Canaanite to Northwest Semitic to Central Semitic to Western Semitic and Proto-Semitic. So the Hebrew language also goes back to Proto-Semites, Proto-Semitic tongue. So the Israelites are ethnically a Semitic people because they descend from Shem. The Israelites are also linguistically Semitic because they descend from Shem. So the ancestors of the Israelites are Semites. Now, one important factor about the Semitic language is that it's part of the Afro-Asiatic language family. Afro-Asiatic, of, relating to, or being a family of languages widely distributed over southwestern Asia and Africa, including the Semitic. And then Semitic, of relating to or consisting of a subfamily of the Afro-Asiatic language family that includes languages such as Hebrew. Afro-Asiatic, also called Afrosan languages, formerly Hemito-Semitic or Semito-Hamitic languages of common origin found in the northern part of Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and some islands and adjacent areas in Western Asia. So here's a map of the Afro-Asiatic languages, and it is spread across the Middle East and in Africa. So, with that being said, Israelites are an Afro-Asiatic Semitic people. Therefore, we should look into the origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. First, we'll take an academic approach to the birth of the Semitic and Afro-Asiatics. Then we'll take a biblical approach, which will be in the next video, part 2. But since we're taking an academic approach, we'll dive into genetics as well. The main genetic term we need to understand is a haplogroup, which I done a video on. You can refer back to that video for more information, but I'll give a quick breakdown right now of what a haplogroup is. So a haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on either their paternal or maternal line. Particular haplogroups are associated with well-known ancestral groups such as the Vikings, Aboriginal Australians, and Celts. By the way, this is from Living DNA. What are haplogroups? Living DNA explain. So, maternal haplogroup. Maternal haplogroups from the mother are determined by assessing mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. This also means that you will have the same maternal haplogroup as anyone else in your direct maternal line. Your mom, brother, sister, aunt, and grandmother on your mother's side follow that haplogroup back to its origin, and you'll find a single mutation occurred at some point in history. So to simplify this, a mitochondrial haplogroup is passed down from mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter, but the son can also have it. A man can have a maternal haplogroup as well because men carry both the X and Y chromosome. Now, what are paternal haplogroups? The paternal haplogroup relates to your Y chromosome, and since that is the sex-determining chromosome for men, it is passed down from father to son. Also, women don't have a Y chromosome. They will not have a paternal haplogroup by default. However, they are able to find out what their paternal haplogroup is if a male relative from the father's side, ideally a brother, father, uncle, or grandfather, is also tested. So to simplify this, the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son, father to son, father to son, and women do not carry this Y chromosome. But if a woman wants to know the male lineage of her male relatives, the men will have to take it, such as a brother and an uncle, father. And the only reason women don't carry the Y chromosome is because, of course, they can't carry both chromosomes like men. Men are both X and Y, and women can't do this. So that is why. And so to conclude, just keep in mind these terms. Y DNA is paternal DNA, it's male, and then mtDNA is maternal DNA, that's female. And the men, as I said earlier, can carry both the paternal and the maternal, whereas women can only carry the maternal. So here's a visual representation of this. This is from ISOGG Wiki, and it says a haplogroup is a genetic population group of people who share a common ancestor on the paternal line and the maternal line. So have this as a representation of yourself, you having your father's paternal or Y DNA, and then your mother's maternal line. This would be if you was a man, you'll carry both, but if you was a female, you'll only carry the mother. Here's another visual representation of this. Let's say you, a man and a woman have a child, two children, a son and a daughter, and so the son will carry both the father's Y DNA and the mother's maternal DNA, represented in blue, and the sister will carry only the maternal DNA, represented in red. So, also haplogroups can be used to trace migrations, common descent, and ethnic origins. This is from What is a Haplogroup and What Can It Tell You About Your Family Tree. This is from ancestralfindings.com, and it reads, at its essence, a haplogroup is an ancestral clan. Some clans are the Vikings, Native Americans, all tribes, Celts, Aboriginal Australians, and other such groups. Your haplogroup tells you where your ancestors came from deep back in time. There are also male and female haplogroups, so you can see where your male and and female sides of the family originated back in prehistoric times. As you as with as with Y-DNA, which traces the male line from father to son, and maternal DNA, which traces the female line from mother to daughter, haplogroups also follow straight male and female descendancy lines. And here's a map to the right, basically representing haplogroups and people groups, like R1b being ancestral Eurasian clade, or haplogroup I1 being a North Proto-European clade. So here is haplogroups of the world. Every human being, every Homo sapiens sapien has a haplogroup, and here's basically just the distribution of these haplogroups throughout the world. So, linguists and geneticists commonly use haplogroups to find the genetic and linguistic origins and migrations of ancient ethnic populations. This is why it's important to know about haplogroups when studying the origins of Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. With that being said, let's begin. So, the origins of Afro-Asiatic and Semitic people. What are the genetic, linguistic, and ethnic origins of Semites and Afro-Asiatic? The final theory for the origin of Semites and Afro-Asiatic is the Levant, or Israel. So let's look at the Levant origins of Afro-Asiatics. So this is a book written by a German linguist, and it says, in order to reconstruct in our imagination the remote past of humans, scholars study first of all material reminders of previous times, remainders of previous times, human bones, tools, paintings, etc. These studies have advanced dramatically over recent years, both thanks to new findings and to the new interpretations of old findings. Only a few scholars know, though, that in many cases, linguists and not anthropologists and archaeologists were the first who came to complete conclusions on the basis of linguistic reconstruction. Their conclusions were confirmed by archaeologists somewhat later and quite independently. Such was the conclusion that ancient Near East cultures of the Natufian type were much older and much more developed than previously thought. Linguists not only reconstructed the lexicon of Natufians, which contained words designating some very significant tools and processes. They also date it by the 12th millennium before present, BP. And they showed that Natufians spoke the Afro-Asiatic language just before this language started to disintegrate into daughter languages, Semitic, Cushitic, and Chadic. So here is the Natufian zone, or the Natufian region of where they were concentrated, basically from the Dead Sea region and the Negev all the way up into Syria. And here is the home of Proto-Semitic, and they both encompass the same region of the Levant. Now here's another good book dealing with the origins of Afro-Asiatic from a Levantine source. And it says, given the modern distribution of Semitic languages over the area in question, which belong to the larger Afro-Asiatic family, it seems appropriate to suggest that these first farmers of the Levant and their Mesolithic predecessors, including the Natufian culture, were speaking a Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. It may be that Proto-Semitic continued to develop within the Levant and Syria area, since both Ebolite and Akkadian early Semitic languages are there attested early, the former around 2400 BC. And so here again is the area of the Natufian culture in what is known as the Levant. So here is a paper from the Science magazine titled Farmers and Their Languages The First Expansions. This is by Jared Diamond and Peter Bellwood. So it reads, Afro-Asiatic. This language family consists of 6 branches, 5 including Ancient Egyptian, confined to North Africa, 1 Semitic, also extended in ancient times to Southwest Asia. That distribution suggests an African origin for the family, whose Semitic branch might then have spread into Southwest Asia. But the overwhelming archaeological attested flow of domesticated crops and animals from the Neolithic times onward into Egypt and through the Arabian Peninsula into Ethiopia is out of West Asia rather than out of Africa. That would make it surprising for Semitic languages to have spread against that stream. There are 2 principal competing hypotheses for the origins of Afro-Asiatic, one based on reconstruction of early vocabulary for cultural and environmental fragments placed the home in the Levant during the earliest Neolithic, the late Neolithic culture 9500 BC, with a subsequent 2 prolonged spread by 5000 BC that is well documented archaeologically. Mixed farming across the Nile into Egypt and North Africa, giving rise to the Egyptian and Berber branches of Afro-Asiatic languages, and sheep and goat-based pastoralism from Western Asia across the Red Sea into Ethiopia and Sudan, giving rise to the Cushitic, Omotic, and Chadic branches. Semitic spread into Ethiopia much later. That Southwest Asian origin will now be masked by language replacement in the homeland, including the spread of Semitic branch of Afro-Asiatic languages, including Akkadian or Babylonian, Aramaic, and Arabic in historic times. So here's that spread of these Afro-Asiatics from the Fertile Crescent. This is a map displaying this. And here is a linguistic map showing it as well, the Afro-Asiatic in this blue color. As you can see, Afro-Asiatics came into Africa either through Sinai or through the Red Sea. So here is a paper from ResearchGate, the prehistory of a dispersal, the Proto-Afrasian, Afro-Asiatic farming lexicon. This is by Alexander Matova. And he says, deduced below are more than 30 common Afrosan, Afro-Asiatic, Hemito-Semitic terms, most of which obviously relate to farming, while some may relate to either farming or the collecting of wild cereal and fruit. The northern branch of Afrosan, Egyptian, Semitic, Chadic, and Berber, and the southern branch, Cushitic and Omotic. The Proto-Afrasian speakers can be identified with high probability with the creators of the Natufian and post-Natufian early Neolithic archaeological culture of the Levant. The identification of Proto-Afrasians as Natufians and post-Natufians seem to satisfy all the 4 criteria. Besides the farming lexicon, there are set of reconstructed Proto-Afrasian terms pointing to incipient animal breeding. Finally, the Levant appears to be an attested region from where population began to spread, starting in the early Neolithic, covering not only wide tracts of southwestern Asia, but also the adjacent parts of the Mediterranean and Africa. Now here's a paper dealing with the spread of people in the Levant in that time period. This paper is called Why Chromosome Diversity Characterized the Gulf of Oman, and it reads, the role of the Levant in the Neolithic dispersal of E3B1-M35 sublineages is supported by the data. So basically, E-M35 spread around the same time Afro-Asiatic spread. And we can see down here when it's dealing with the branches, one branch of E-M35, such as Z827, was spread into North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, Fertile Crescent, East Africa, Anatolia, Europe, and Southwest Asia. Another branch of M78 was spread into North Africa, East Africa, Europe, the Arabian Peninsula, Anatolia, and the Fertile Crescent. And so as we can see here, the spread of the E branches went into Europe, as they said, went into North Africa, and even went into Arabia, and some even went further south into the Horn of Africa, going out of Arabia and into Mesopotamia, as we can see here. So E does perfectly fit that spread of Afro-Asiatics from the Levant throughout both Africa and West Asia, or the Middle East. Now here is that spread of Afro-Asiatics from the Levant based on language and not DNA. As we can see here, the AA, which stands for Afro-Asiatic, spread into the Mesopotamia region, spread throughout Arabia, and into the Horn of Africa. And then we have Afro-Asiatics also spread through Sinai into North Africa and other parts of Africa. And so here is just a visual representation of everything. We have the area of Natufian culture. We have the spread of haplogroup E, and we have the spread of Afro-Asiatic right here. So here is a paper dealing with the ancestors of Afro-Asiatics and Natufians in the Levant. This paper is called The Genetic Linguistic Inference, and it is by St. Clair Michael. And so it reads, the 2005 book First Farmers of Origins of Agricultural Societies by Peter Bellwood provides an excellent resource for linguists who wish to explore the worldwide correlation between the origins of agriculture and the expansion of languages. Prior to the adoption of agriculture in Southwest Asia and elsewhere in the world, for that matter, the human tribe practiced hunter-gatherer techniques in order to survive. The evolution of agricultural in Southwest Asia generally follows a series of cultural transitions that begin with the Natufians, followed by the pre-Pottery Neolithic A and pre-Pottery Neolithic B, and then finally the development of pottery itself. The Natufians stand as an important cultural transition because they were the last hunter-gatherers in the Middle East. The Natufians appeared near the Sea of Galilee in what is now present-day Israel. The Afro-Asiatic language family contains 376 languages. These languages are distributed throughout the Middle East, as well as in North Africa, East Africa, and West Central Africa. Afro-Asiatic is subdivided into 6 main branches: Egyptian, Semitic, Chadic, Cushitic, Omotic, and Berber. Long-standing opinion among linguists places the prehistoric origins of Afro-Asiatic languages somewhere in East Africa. Interestingly, linguistic data may also support this model of Afro-Asiatic origins using linguistic reconstruction. Matolvi 2002 presented a proto-Afro-Asiatic lexicon of farming terminology. Based on the reconstruction, he suggested that the Natufians, agriculture, and Afro-Asiatic co-evolved in Southwest Asia. Finally, another reason for identifying Southwest Asia as the plutonic homeland of Afro-Asiatic languages is the Y chromosome data as presented below in section 4 and 5. So this is going to deal with the DNA. So it says, focusing now on the green cluster, figure 5.5.4 reflects the mutation within this cluster are variants of the E-Z827 haplogroup. An interesting study from 2016, Lizards was able to extract 3 ancient DNA samples from a Natufian archaeological site in Israel. As the reader may recall from section 2, the Natufians were the last hunter-gatherers of Southwest Asia. 2 of the samples belong to E-PF1961, which is an ancestral marker for E-M34. The E-M34 mutation has a widespread distribution currently found in populations of the Mediterranean Europe, Southeastern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. For linguists, the E-M34 mutation is significant as it represents a potential back to Africa marker that co-expanded from Southwest Asia into East Africa with goat and sheep herders about 6,000 years ago. This Neolithic migration, as the reader may recall from section 3, appears to have carried Afro-Asiatic languages from Southwest Asia to East and North Africa. The ancient Natufian Y chromosome data, as just presented, supports this position because E-PF1961 mutation is an upstream marker from E-M34. Thus, E-M34 probably evolved in the Middle East. Additional analysis of contemporary genetic data also supports Middle East, the agricultural origins of Afro-Asiatic languages in East Africa. Kutumving, a 2004 study, suggested that E-M34 arose in the Levant based on their interpretation of the data and wider distribution of this marker outside of Africa. Additionally, Cadis, a 2008 study, date the E-M123 mutation in the Middle East to about 11,000 years ago, which potentially places the evolution of the downstream E-M34 mutation during the Southwest Asian Neolithic. So now let's visualize the mutation of Afro-Asiatics from the Levant, and also let's visualize the migration of haplogroup E from the Levant. Alright, so disclaimer, I'm going to play this video and I am protected under fair use. This is for educational purposes and research and teaching. So the video that I'm about to play, I am protected under fair use. For this next video that I'm about to play, I just want to make it clear again that I'm protected under the Fair Use Act, and that the video that I'm about to play is for teaching purposes and it's for disseminating information and research, and I am protected under the Fair Use Act. Now, what's interesting about the Levant origins of Afro-Asiatics is that it's actually believed that Semites specifically descend from the Natufians, or Neolithic Levantines. According to the book In Hot Pursuit of Language and Prehistory by John D. Bingston, he says this paper makes an additional inference since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. Now, with that being said, Neolithic Levantines, the ancestors of Proto-Semites, the only haplogroup that they had was haplogroup E. This is a paper called Inference, Genomic Insight into the Origin of Farming in the Ancient Near East. And it says craniometric analysis have suggested an affinity between the Natufians and populations of North or Sub-Saharan Africa, a result that finds some support from Y chromosome analysis, which shows that the Natufians, the successor Levantine Neolithic population, carried haplogroup E of likely ultimate African origin, which has not been detected in other ancient males from Western Asia. Here's a paper called Ancient DNA from Chalcolithic Israel, reveals the role of population mixture in cultural transformation. And it reads, this finding contrasts with both earlier Neolithic and Epiolithic Levantine populations, which were dominated by haplogroup E. The latest study on the origins of the Semitic language has its birth in the Levant, it of course being the descendants of the Natufians. And this paper called Paleolithic DNA from the Caucasus Revealed Core of West Eurasian Ancestry says such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa. So here's the paper dealing with the latest origin for the Semitic languages. It's called the Bayesian Phylogenetic Analysis of Semitic Languages Identifies an Early Bronze Age Origin of Semitic in the Near East. And so it reads, the evolution of languages provides a unique opportunity to study human population history. The origin of Semitic and the nature of dispersals by Semitic-speaking populations are of great importance to our understanding of the ancient history of the Middle East and the Horn of Africa. Our statistical tests of alternative Semitic histories support an additional divergence of Akkadian from ancestral Semitic over competing hypotheses, i.e., an African origin of Semitic. We estimate an early Bronze Age origin for Semitic approximately 5,750 years ago in the Levant, and further propose that contemporary Ethio-Semitic languages of Africa reflect a single introduction of early Ethio-Semitic from southern Arabia approximately 2,800 years ago. So our analysis of the Semitic language family produced a deep phylogeny that estimates the origin of Semitic at approximately 4,400 through 7,400 YBP. This result indicates that the ancestor of all Semitic languages in our dataset have been spoken in the Near East no earlier than approximately 7,400 YBP, after having diverged from Afro-Asiatic in Africa. So the Semitic people, Semitic branch of languages, dispersed out of Africa from the other Afro-Asiatic family. And so it says the discovery of such early Semitic languages could increase estimates of the age of Semitic and alter its geographical origin if these early Semitic languages were found in Africa rather than in the Middle East. And so here's the migration from the study showing that Afro-Asiatic, the origin of Afro-Asiatic being in Africa, placing it actually in northeastern Africa. And then here is ancestral Semitic, again, still in Africa, but also in in Arabia, should we say Sinai. And then the dispersal of Semitic from the Levant, right here with its origin point. So it says map of Semitic languages and inferred dispersal, and it says the map also presents the dispersal of Semitic languages inferred from our study and origin of Afro-Asiatic along the African coast of the Red Sea, supported by comparative analysis, is indicated in red, although other African origins of Afro-Asiatic have been proposed. Southwest Ethiopia by Bench 2006, which we read earlier, the assumed location of the divergence of ancestral Semitic from Afro-Asiatic between the African coast of the Red Sea and the Near East is indicated in italics. And so here it is right here. Origin of Afro-Asiatic, then ancestral Semitic near Sinai, and then Semitic itself dispersing in the Levant. So it reads, our estimate for the origin of Semitic 4,400 through 7,400 YBP predates the first Akkadian inscriptions in the archaeological record of northern Mesopotamia by approximately 100 through 3000 BC. The city-state of Sumer were established and flourishing in Mesopotamia with their own indigenous language unrelated to Semitic by approximately 5,400 YBP. So it is unlikely that Akkadian was spoken in Sumer for the entirety of the possible 3,000 year interval between the origin of Semitic and Akkadian's initial appearance in the archaeological record. The presence of ancient members of the two oldest Semitic groups, East and West Semitic, in the same region of the Levant, combined with a possible long interval, 100 through 3,000 years, between the origin of Semitic and the appearance of Akkadian and Sumer, suggesting a Semitic origin in the Near East Levant, and a later movement of Akkadian eastward into Mesopotamia and Sumer. We used Bayesian phylogenetic methods to elucidate the relationship and divergence date of Semitic languages, which we then relate to the epigraphic and archaeological record to produce a comparative analysis of Semitic origins and dispersals after the divergence of ancestral Semitic from Afro-Asiatic in Africa. We estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin, 5,750 YBP, in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. What's interesting about this model for the spread of Proto-Semitic languages is that it fits the exact same spread of haplogroup E. So let's keep this model in mind. They have Semitic popping up, or should we say, cultivating itself in the Levant and then dispersing and going all throughout Mesopotamia and going into Arabia and back into the Horn of Africa. It fits exactly with what haplogroup E did if it originated in the Levant. It will go into Mesopotamia, and it will go into Arabia, and it will go back into Africa in the Horn of Africa. So here is it put together. We have right here the origin of the Semitic languages, some remaining in the Levant, some going into Mesopotamia, some going into North Africa with Moroccan Arabic, and then some going into Arabia, and then some going into the Horn of Africa. Same thing with E-M35. You have some going towards Mesopotamia, you have some going into North Africa, some going into Arabia, and then others going into the Horn of Africa. So it fits perfectly. Haplogroup E and Proto-Semitic. Now, ironically, or perhaps unironically, it is believed that Proto-Semites had haplogroup E and spread it particularly from the Levant. Here's a study that actually says this. E-M123 originated some 19,000 years ago during the last ice age. Its place of origin is uncertain, but it was probably in the Red Sea region, somewhere between the southern Levant and Ethiopia. Its main subclade, E-M34, most probably emerged in the Levant about 15,000 years ago. Soon afterwards, M34 split into two branches, M84 and Z841, which were probably found in the Fertile Crescent during the Neolithic period. And so here's the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization, which encompasses Egypt, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. So E-M34 lineages experienced a much more dramatic expansion during the Copper Age, or known as the Chalcolithic period. Also downstream of CTS1096, the Y14891 and Z21018 clades are typically found among people of Jewish ancestry, while PF6391 and Z21421 are found in the Levant, specifically Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan, and the Arabian Peninsula. F1382 appears to have expanded during the Iron Age from the Levant to the Arabian Peninsula, where it is exclusively found today. So here's the spread of haplogroup E from the Levant. As we can see right here, a very old point of origin. And then over here, we see another branch or another old sample found. Over here is the dates, by the way. So we see the oldest date being in the Levant, and then another date popping up, I would say, in between the Levant and Mesopotamia in the northern part of Arabia. And here's another old sample we found. And then here are the samples here's the old sample, and then here are the people that descend from it, mostly Middle Eastern populations. And then here's another sample that pops up 7,500 years, and then here are the people who descend from it, Mediterranean and Middle Eastern populations. And then we get an even younger sample in Mesopotamia, and here are all the populations that descend from it. Again, Middle Eastern and Mediterranean populations. And so when we put all together, we do see this expansion of a lot of old samples of E in the Levant, but as you go outwards, the samples get a bit younger, and we see these haplogroup E individuals in Mesopotamia and going into Arabia, which fits with the Semites going from the Levant into Mesopotamia, specifically people like the Eastern Akkadians and their descendants. Haplogroup E is the best candidate for the lineage of early Afro-Asiatic and Semitic populations. One of the top three beliefs for the origins of Afro-Asiatic, including Semites, is that they emerged from the Levant and carried haplogroup E. Now, how would these Natufians, the ancestors of Semites, look like? Here is a paper that actually goes into this, the questionable contribution of the Neolithic and the Bronze Age to European craniofacial form. And so it says, it is a further surprise that the Epio-Paleolithic Natufian of Israel, from whom the Neolithic realm was assumed to arise, has a clear link to sub-Saharan Africa. Interestingly enough, however, the small Natufian sample falls between the Niger-Congo group and the other samples used. This placement suggests that there may have been a sub-Saharan African element in the makeup of the Natufians. As shown in Figure 1, the Somalis and the Egyptian Bronze Age sample from Naquata may also have a hint of a sub-Saharan African component. Next, the Congo, Dahomey, and Hemia samples were run as a Niger-Congo twin. Then Naquata Bronze Age Egyptian, the Nubian, Nubia Bronze Age, Israeli Falahim Arabic farmers, and Somali samples were lumped as prehistoric/recent Northeast Africa. So here is the Niger-Congo and the Natufian, and there seems to be like a point of origin or a split. Basically, they have a very similar form about them. And then here is the Niger-Congo, the Natufian, and prehistoric/northeast, recent Northeast Africa, and Natufian sort of sits in between the two of them. So Natufian sort of looks like something in between a Niger-Congo person and a recent/prehistoric Northeast African. So it says, the Niger-Congo speakers, Dahomey, Congo, and Hemnia cluster closely with each other and a bit less closely with the Nubian sample, both the recent and the Bronze Age Nubians, and more remotely with the Naquata Bronze Age sample of Egypt, the modern Somalis, and the Arab-speaking Falahim farmers of Israel. When those samples were separated and ran in a single analysis, as in Figure 1, there clearly is a tie between them that is diluted the further one gets from sub-Saharan Africa. If the late Paleocene Natufian sample from Israel is the source from which that Neolithic spread was derived, then there was clearly a sub-Saharan African element present of almost equal importance to the late prehistoric Eurasian element. So this is a reconstruction of a Natufian from Jericho, and this is the way that he would have looked. And here to me is a picture of the same Natufian next to Common, and in my opinion, I believe that this Natufian does resemble Common. From the nose, the lips, the cheekbones, the head, everything about it kind of makes me think that this Natufian will look something like him. So conclusion. The ancestors of the Israelites, Afro-Asiatic Semitic people, could have emerged from the Levant, specifically Neolithic Levantines or Natufians. The genotype, therefore, would be Y-DNA haplogroup E, and their phenotype would be Natufian. And here is all the information put together for this. The fact that haplogroup E is considered to be Proto-Semitic, the fact that Natufians were in the Levant, which is the same place where Semitic originated in, and the same place where haplogroup E could have dispersed from, and phenotypically, here is the phenotype of the Natufians. So with all that put together, this is what we have on one screen. So we conclude with this study, the origins of Proto-Afro-Asiatics, and returning back to the main point, as I said, if the Israelites are a Semitic people, an Afro-Asiatic people, and if their ancestors are also a Proto-Semitic people, then it is likely that they would be carriers of haplogroup E, both their ancestors, their Proto-Semitic ancestors, and the Israelites themselves. I'm basing this on logic and on the studies we've read about the origins of Afro-Asiatics, Proto-Semites, and haplogroup E. And I believe this is the best way to go about things when it comes to studying these people. And so far, this is what I am leaning towards when it comes to the Y chromosome, the Y DNA of the Israelites. It would be an E marker. And this is where we conclude. Hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and there will be more information and videos coming out soon. And we will have Q&As one day where you can ask me questions. And have a great day. Shalom.